Have you ever felt that silence can be as powerful as a scream? There are moments when you wish you hadn't spoken, hadn't responded in anger, hadn't rushed to defend yourself when criticized, hadn't shared too much with someone who was only listening to judge. I've been there too. I used to talk too much, over-explained, confronted too early. And in return, I learned this: the moments I chose silence, deliberate, calm silence, were the moments I kept my peace, my dignity, and sometimes, a relationship. Stoicism, an ancient school of philosophy, doesn't teach us to be passive or to suffer in silence. It teaches us when to speak, and when not to. Silence in the Stoic sense is not weakness. It is the strength of knowing you don't need to prove anything with words. So when exactly should we stay silent? When we're unfairly criticized. When we're angry. When gossip swirls around us. In this video, I'll walk you through 12 key moments when silence is not only wise, but powerful. Not just for protecting your peace, but for showing your strength, your self-awareness, and your character. Before we begin, remember, you cannot control others, but you can always control how you respond. And sometimes, the strongest response is no response at all. 1. When being criticized unfairly. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I was the only person in the team who got called out during a meeting, not because I made a mistake, but for something I wasn't even responsible for. My boss spoke directly, no filter. Colleagues stared. I stood there, silent. How did it feel? Like being hit with a bucket of cold water in a room full of people I thought were on my side. I wanted to speak up, to explain, to defend myself. But what held me back wasn't weakness. It was a line I once read from Marcus Aurelius: if something external hurts you, it's not the thing itself that causes pain, but your judgment of it. I closed my eyes for a moment, and I chose silence. Not out of resignation, but to preserve calm, when everything around me was losing it. Because honestly, when we're unfairly criticized, what hurts the most isn't what people say, but how we react to it. One rash response can cost you trust, reputation, or a relationship you've spent years building. So choosing silence at the right time is actually a mark of strength. You don't need to shout to prove you're right. You don't need to fight back just to make a point. Sometimes, all you need to do is stand still, look straight, and wait for a better moment to let your actions speak. Stoicism doesn't teach us to avoid confrontation. It teaches us that in chaos, the wise protect their inner peace first. Instead of reacting, they choose to respond. Instead of speaking too soon, they let the truth speak later. I learned this after that meeting. I didn't respond immediately. I went back, reviewed everything, and sent a short, emotion-free email, just the facts. I didn't accuse anyone, just asked the team to double-check responsibilities so there was no misunderstanding. And the most surprising thing? The same boss who criticized me was the first to apologize. As for me, I kept my composure, and most importantly, earned even more respect from the team. So if you're being unfairly blamed, misunderstood, or misjudged, remember, silence doesn't mean surrender. It's how you stay in control of what matters most, yourself. Take a breath. Step back. Separate the criticism from your self-worth. Just because someone says you're wrong doesn't make it true. Don't let their voice define your value. Epictetus once said, "You may not control what others say, but you can always control how you respond." And once you know that, criticism becomes just another test. A chance to see how long you can stand still in the storm. How much calm you can keep before responding with clarity. Because in the end, it's not those who react the fastest that are the strongest, it's those who know when to stay silent so they don't act out of impulse, but act from intention. And that's the quiet kind of strength Stoicism teaches those of us trying to live with clarity in a noisy world. 2. When dealing with anger. There was one afternoon I'll never forget, not because it was special, but because it almost destroyed a friendship I had spent years building. A close friend called me, voice tense, accusing me of not taking his side during an argument he'd had with someone else. I had no idea what was going on, but every word he spoke was laced with frustration and blame. I remember clenching my fists, heat rushing to my chest. Part of me wanted to shout, "You've got it all wrong." But then I heard Marcus Aurelius in my head, "The consequences of anger are far worse than the causes of it." And so I chose silence. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew if I spoke in that moment, I wouldn't be speaking with clarity, I'd be speaking with fire. And Stoicism has always taught us one thing: real strength is not reacting when we're at our most reactive. Anger isn't inherently bad. It's a natural human emotion. The problem is how quickly we respond when it rises. We let that wave crash through us, destroying reason, and all that's left afterward is regret. Stoicism doesn't tell us to suppress anger, it tells us to stay present with it without letting it hijack our actions. Epictetus once advised, "Keep silent for the most part, or speak only when necessary." He didn't mean to live like a shadow. He meant that when emotions are high, words can become weapons. Not just hurting others, but wounding ourselves. I still remember that afternoon clearly. After listening quietly, I said just one sentence, "I'll call you back once I've had time to think." Then I hung up. I sat down. I wrote out everything I was feeling, not to send, but to understand myself. An hour later, I called him back. My voice was calmer. And this time, instead of an argument, we actually had a conversation. Anger is a form of energy. You can use it to destroy, or to transform. A Stoic learns to pause, breathe, and let the storm inside pass before taking action. Then, and only then, do they respond, not from the wound, but from wisdom. Let's be honest, there are times when we're pushed, insulted, or taken to the edge. But that's exactly when the real test begins. Can you stay in control of yourself? Think about it. When was the last time you lost your temper? And if you had stayed silent for just 10 more seconds, how might things have turned out differently? I'm not saying silence solves every outburst. But I believe this: silence is the doorway to a better reaction. It doesn't deny your feelings, but it gives you space to choose your response, rather than defaulting to an emotional reflex. So next time your blood starts to boil, your hands begin to tremble, your chest pounds from rage, pause. You don't have to reply right away. You don't have to win in that moment. Just hold your ground for the first 10 seconds. Maybe that silence will save a relationship. Maybe it'll help you realize what you're really angry about. And maybe, just maybe, in that quiet moment, you'll find a way to respond, one you can be proud of, not just now, but years from now. 3. Silence in the midst of boasting. Imagine you're sitting at a company party, sipping water while a lively crowd chats around you. Next to you, a colleague is passionately describing his new car, the apartment he just invested in, and a big deal he's about to sign. You nod politely and smile, but inside, something stirs. Part of you feels annoyed. Another part feels small. That familiar voice in your head whispers, "Am I falling behind?" I've been in moments like that too. I've jumped in with my own small achievements, trying to prove I'm doing well too. But after those conversations, I didn't feel better. I felt drained, like I had stepped into a race I never meant to join. A race where winning isn't about true worth, but about who can impress more loudly. Stoicism teaches us something simple: true strength doesn't need to shout to be seen. Silence in the face of boasting isn't weakness. It's clarity. It means you no longer need to declare your worth, because you already know it. Once, I had lunch with an old friend. He talked at length about work, real estate, investments, high-level connections. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't counter with my own stories. I simply smiled and asked questions. At the end of the meal, he patted my shoulder and said, "Talking to you is really refreshing." I smiled, not because I'm especially humble, but because I've trained myself to do one thing: listen without needing to compare. The truth is, boasting is often just insecurity in disguise. People who talk the most about what they have are often those still craving inner validation. So instead of responding with a "me too" story, try stepping back, observing, and standing firm in your own self-worth. You don't need to announce what you've accomplished to earn respect. You just need to live in a way that, when you look back, you can nod in quiet pride at the life you've built. That's real confidence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." And I believe that in a world where everyone wants to speak, to shine, to be noticed, choosing silence at the right moment is a quiet form of power. Because when you listen instead of one-upping, when you stay calm instead of rushing to speak, when you let others take the spotlight, you'll notice something unexpected. Not only do you keep your peace, but you also radiate a quiet confidence. One that doesn't need applause. One that already knows its worth. 4. When confronted with injustice. There are moments in life when, even though you're right, you're still treated unfairly. Not because you're weak, but because the world, sometimes, isn't fair. I once watched a friend get passed over for the company's year-end awards, even though he had carried the toughest part of the project. No one stood up for him. He didn't say anything either. He simply packed up his notes and kept working like nothing happened. I asked him, "Why didn't you speak up?" He looked at me, gave a small smile, and said, "I don't do this for applause. I do it because I know it needs to be done." That answer stayed with me. Because it reminded me of something Stoicism always emphasizes: we don't control how others treat us, but we always control how we respond. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who did the wrong." Remaining silent in the face of injustice isn't weakness, it's a conscious choice. It's choosing not to let anger turn you into the very thing you oppose. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, emerged not with hatred, but with a vision for peace and reconciliation. He didn't retaliate. He didn't carry vengeance. And through his steady silence, he transformed a nation. We may not carry a country on our shoulders, but in our own lives, every time we choose not to retaliate with bitterness, we contribute to a quieter, stronger kind of peace. Honestly, when you're treated unfairly, the first instinct is to shout back, "I don't deserve this. I should be recognized." But what if you paused for a moment and asked yourself, will reacting now really help? Or will it only make things messier? Stoicism doesn't tell us to stay silent forever. But it does teach us this: hold your silence while you're still burning with anger, only speak when your words come from clarity, not from the wound. Injustice will always exist, in the workplace, in society, in relationships. But instead of letting it drag you down, let it be the ground on which you rise above. Don't let the world corrupt your character. Choose your values over your impulses. And sometimes, that very silence, when you don't fight back, don't lash out, don't brag, becomes the thing people quietly admire. Not because you won, but because you didn't lose yourself in a fight that never deserved your spirit in the first place. 5. When handling insults with Stoic wisdom. Once, I stumbled upon a public comment under one of my posts. This person wasn't just disagreeing with my ideas, they mocked my appearance, dragged up my past, and took aim at things completely unrelated to the discussion. It wasn't criticism. It was an attack. My first reaction? Anger. I wanted to reply immediately, with a sharp, clever response to put them in their place. But then I remembered a line from Epictetus: if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. And I paused. I turned off the screen, took a walk, and I asked myself, what exactly am I angry about? Their words? Or the fact that, deep down, I still care too much about what others think of me? Insults, at their core, can only hurt us if we allow them to touch the parts of us we haven't healed. If someone calls you worthless, and you know your value, the words slide off. But if somewhere inside, you've doubted yourself, that same insult cuts deep. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be numb. It teaches us to own our reactions instead of surrendering them. And sometimes, the most powerful response is none at all. Gandhi was cursed, beaten, and insulted in public. Yet he didn't respond with fists or sharp words. He chose silence. And that calm presence often disarmed his opponents far more than any reply could. Because nothing throws off an angry person more than someone who simply refuses to react. I'm not saying you should stay silent in every situation. But try to discern which insults deserve your voice, and which are just noise. Because every time you react, you hand over a bit of your emotional control. And if you let yourself be dragged around by every comment or jab, you'll always be living on other people's terms, not your own. Another time, I met an old acquaintance at a gathering. In front of a group, he laughed and said, "You haven't changed much, still pretty average, huh?" The room went quiet. I smiled, nodded, and said nothing. That evening, someone pulled me aside and said, "I admire how you handled that." I would have clapped back. But you shut him down without saying a word. And I thought, that's Stoicism. Not because I'm perfect, but because I've learned, you don't need to respond to every put down. If you stand tall in who you are, your silence becomes your shield. So if you're being insulted, at work, online, or even at home, remember, silence isn't surrender. It's a way of protecting your dignity. It shows that you won't fall into the trap of pettiness. And one day, when the other person realizes their own immaturity, and you've kept your calm, you'll understand, silence can be the loudest, most mature answer a person can give. 6. Silence when others don't need to know. I used to have a bad habit. Whenever I started a big plan, I'd tell people right away. Friends, coworkers, sometimes even distant acquaintances would know what I was about to do. I'm starting my own company. I'm writing a book. I'm moving to a new place. Each time I shared, I felt excited, like I'd already taken a real step forward. But over time, most of the things I excitedly announced never really happened. I realized something. Saying it out loud gave me a false sense of progress. And worse, not everyone you tell actually wants you to succeed. Stoic philosophy teaches us this. Let your soul be like a garden still growing. Don't invite others in when even you haven't yet understood what you're planting. Silence doesn't mean isolation. It means knowing that not everything needs to be shared. Some ideas are still sprouting. If you expose them too soon, even an accidental comment or a passing doubt can make them wither. I remember once telling a friend I was thinking of quitting my job to pursue personal work. He listened and said, "Be careful, lots of people try freelancing and end up crawling back to corporate." That sentence? Like a bucket of cold water. I started doubting myself. I ended up doing nothing. 2 years later, I watched someone else do exactly what I once planned, and they succeeded. That's when I realized it wasn't a bad idea. I just shared it with the wrong person, at the wrong time. Stoicism reminds us that if something hasn't fully formed, hold it like a small flame in your hands. Protect it. Let it grow stronger before you expose it to the world. Words don't just reveal a plan, they can also drain your drive. Have you ever regretted sharing too much? Told someone a dream only to receive doubt, sarcasm, or indifference? And those small reactions, though subtle, made you hesitate? The truth is, not everyone is malicious. But not everyone is sensitive enough to handle what's sacred to you. So choose silence, not as a wall, but as protection. Silence to nurture. Silence to observe. Silence to act, instead of just talking for the sake of being praised. And one day, when you've done the work and the results speak for themselves, you won't need to say anything at all. Your silence will be what leaves others speechless. 7. Silence before you fully understand. There was a time I came across a post on social media, someone sharing a very sensitive family issue. In the comments, hundreds of people jumped in, some criticized, some defended, others mocked. One comment stood out, gaining thousands of likes. It was from someone outside the situation, making a bold judgment as if they understood everything. But a few days later, the full story came to light. And that viral comment? It turned out to be completely wrong. The person who wrote it stayed silent, but the damage was done. A single premature opinion cost them their credibility, which had taken years to build. That moment taught me something important. Don't speak until you understand the whole picture. Especially in situations that are emotionally charged, it's tempting to take sides, to appear wise, to say something that gets noticed. But speaking too soon, especially without enough understanding, can do more harm than saying nothing at all. Stoic philosophy teaches us to cultivate intellectual humility. The deeper we understand the world, the more we realize just how complex it is. And our first reaction is often emotional, not wise. There was a time I almost fell into this trap. A friend confided in me, saying they were being mistreated at work. I immediately felt the urge to defend them, to speak out. But thankfully, I paused and asked more questions. The more I listened, the more I saw how complicated the situation really was. There were 3 sides to the story, and no clear villain. Had I spoken too early, I would have picked the wrong side. Worse, I could have damaged relationships with others who weren't actually in the wrong. Stoicism reminds us, observe before you speak. Listen before you judge. Accept that you may not know enough before you conclude. Sometimes, your silence will make others think you're difficult to read. That's okay. A Stoic doesn't aim to look smart, they aim to be smart. And real intelligence begins with silence, giving yourself the space to see things clearly. Honestly, in a world where everyone has a microphone, a platform, an opinion, choosing to stay silent until you truly understand is a rare strength. You don't need to always have something to say. Your silence doesn't mean indifference. It means you respect the truth more than your own ego. And when you remain silent while the crowd shouts, you don't get swept away by emotional noise. You stay centered. You wait for the dust to settle, then, and only then, you speak. That's not just caution. That's wisdom. 8. When facing loss. There are moments when no words can help, because in the face of deep loss, every sentence feels unnecessary. When grief arrives, silence is often the only thing that remains. I've experienced a moment like that, when someone I loved most left this world for good. No warning. No goodbye. In the early days, I received messages, calls, and well-meaning phrases, "Stay strong, it'll get better soon." But truthfully, I can't remember a single sentence anyone said. What I remember is the silence in the room that night. The ticking clock. The darkness that surrounded me. My heart breaking, and having no idea how to piece it back together. In A Grief Observed, C.S. Lewis wrote, "The pain I feel now is the price of the joy I had." That, to me, is a profoundly Stoic sentiment, because Stoicism doesn't deny grief. It simply teaches us how to remain upright within it. Not to run from pain. Not to exaggerate it. But to sit with it and still hold our center. The Stoics believed, loss is a natural part of life. Everything that arrives will eventually leave. People come to teach us something, and when the lesson ends, they move on. In the end, the only thing we truly control is how we receive that change. I stopped trying to fill the void with distractions. I stopped forcing myself to get over it. Instead, I allowed myself to feel, with intention. I wrote down my pain. I walked in silence, without music. I let memories return, not to push them away, not to cling to them, but to let them pass through. And I realized, the silence that follows loss is not emptiness, it's space. Space for the soul to contract, to rest, and slowly, to recover. Stoicism doesn't tell us to be strong in a robotic way. It gently reminds us, everything is temporary, even pain. And if we can stay calm enough to listen to ourselves in the silence, we'll find a deeper balance within the chaos. Honestly, there will be days when you feel like you've lost everything. But it's often in those very days, when you sit quietly in your grief, without rushing to escape, that you finally see what's truly left within you. And most of the time, it's a strength you never knew was there. If you're facing loss right now, whether it's a loved one, a broken dream, or a version of yourself that's no longer here, give yourself permission to be silent. Don't force yourself to move on. Stay for a while. Sit with it. Quietly. Honestly. Long enough to feel, but also steady enough to know, life hasn't ended. It's simply changed form. 9. Silence in the face of provocation. There are certain people who don't need you to be wrong, they just need you to lose your temper. They're not interested in discussion, they want you to lose control. I once worked with someone like that during a group project. Every time I shared an idea, he'd cut in, shake his head, and throw out a sarcastic remark. At first, I stayed calm. But by the third time, I snapped back. My tone was sharper, not offensive, but no longer composed. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me. And the man who provoked me smiled. He didn't want to be right. He just wanted me to lose the image I had worked hard to build. I kept thinking afterward, I should have held my silence for just a few more seconds. That was all it would have taken to stay grounded. Stoicism teaches us this: you don't control what others do, but you always control how you respond. When someone tries to provoke you, the instinctive reaction is to strike back. But the stronger response is to refuse to meet them at the same emotional level. Epictetus once said, "The person who angers you owns you." And the truth is, some people speak not to understand, but to attack. It's not about your value. It's about their inner chaos. If you react, you feed it. If you remain calm, you cut off their fuel. Let's be honest, nobody likes to be provoked. But consider this: every time you choose silence in the face of unreasonable confrontation, you're not losing, you're protecting your dignity. I tried this once in a different meeting. Someone made a passive-aggressive comment aimed at me. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. After the meeting, I walked up and said, "I'm not sure I understood your point. Could we speak privately after this?" Just that one sentence. He lowered his eyes, nodded. After that, the public jab stopped. Provocation needs an audience. When you don't react, the performance has no stage. So if there's someone constantly poking, mocking, or trying to get under your skin, don't hand them your emotions. They may speak, but you have the power to deny them control. And often, your steady silence is the clearest message: I'm not playing this game. 10. When speaking would cause harm. I once had a close friend, the kind who always asked, "What do you honestly think about me?" In the beginning, I always gave truthful answers. Sometimes praise, sometimes blunt feedback. But there was one time he asked about a personal project he'd been working on. I could see the flaws. I also knew he was in a vulnerable place, and that speaking my mind at that moment wouldn't help. It wouldn't guide him forward. It would only weigh him down. I almost spoke. Then I paused. And I remembered something the Stoics emphasized: not everything true must be said, and not everything said is truly meant to help. Sometimes, we speak out of care. But other times, we speak just to feel right. And Stoicism does not encourage action born of ego. I chose silence. Not to lie, but to wait for a better moment. When my friend was more grounded, when our relationship could bear the weight of honesty. And strangely, that silence preserved the friendship more than any advice could have. Stoicism doesn't tell us to avoid truth. It teaches us, truth, without compassion and wisdom, can become a blade, sharp and unhelpful. There are truths that must be spoken, but only at the right time, in the right way, and with the right intention. Have you ever felt that tension? When you knew something, but hesitated to say it? When you realized that speaking might unburden you, but burden the other? That's not weakness. That's awareness. A true Stoic isn't someone who just says it like it is, for the sake of bluntness. They are someone who chooses silence when it protects respect, for the other, and for themselves. I've learned a small but powerful rule. Before saying something difficult, ask yourself, does this person need to hear this now? Am I speaking to help them, or to release something in me? If I stay silent, am I being dishonest, or am I preserving kindness? Silence, in this context, isn't avoidance. It's waiting for the moment when your voice can come from the heart, not the ego. Because some things, if said at the wrong time, in the wrong way, can still be wrong, even when they're right. 11. Silence to hear yourself. One morning, I went for a walk in the park, early, before the city fully woke up. No headphones. No phone. No one talking beside me. Just the sound of footsteps on dry leaves and the rhythm of my own breath. And in that moment, I realized, it had been a long time, since I truly listened to myself. We live in an age where noise is the default. At work, we listen to our boss. After work, we scroll through social media. At home, there's music, YouTube, TV. There's always some sound filling our minds. And because of that, we no longer hear what we're really thinking, really feeling, or truly needing. Stoicism isn't just about facing the world. It's also about learning how to return to yourself. And to do that, we need silence. Silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a space where your inner voice can finally be heard. It's when you stop reacting to the outside world, and begin paying attention to the one within. I started trying something simple. Each morning, before turning on my phone, I'd sit still for 3 minutes. Just breathe. And check in, what's here right now? Some days it was a lingering worry. Some days, exhaustion. And on others, a surprising sense of calm. I realized, if I didn't pause, I would have missed all of that. A true Stoic isn't just someone who appears strong. They are someone who stays connected to themselves, so they don't drift from their core values. And that connection begins with silence. Honestly, you could live your whole life without ever truly listening to yourself. You might work, love, help others, but inside, feel scattered, lost, unsure of who you are anymore. And here's the strange thing, the answers you seek aren't out there in someone else's advice, they're already in you. You just haven't been quiet enough to hear them. So give yourself a small pocket of stillness each day. Don't call it meditation or a fancy ritual. Just turn down the world's volume and sit with yourself. Because if you don't take time to hear yourself, it's easy to get lost in the noise of everything else. And someone who can't hear their own voice often ends up living by everyone else's expectations instead of their own. 12. When surrounded by rumors and gossip. I've been the subject of rumors before. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make a few people look at me differently. Some asked questions. Others said nothing, just quietly pulled away. At first, I felt wronged. I wanted to speak up, to explain, to set the record straight. But then I remembered a quote from Marcus Aurelius. The best revenge is to be unlike him who wronged you. And so I chose silence. Not silence to avoid, but silence to let the truth reveal itself over time. Because I realized something, those who truly know you don't need an explanation. And those who believe a rumor easily, probably aren't worth convincing. Stoicism teaches us, don't worry about what's beyond your control. Rumors live on speculation, emotion, and the imaginations of others. And sometimes, the more you try to clarify, the more you feed the fire. Honestly, being misunderstood hurts. But you don't need to defend yourself in every situation. Sometimes, silence is the strongest statement you can make. I kept working. I greeted people as usual. I didn't avoid anyone. I didn't overcompensate. And surprisingly, a few weeks later, everything faded. The ones who had doubted me started to see the truth. And it was the calm, quiet way I carried myself, without retaliation, that made them believe me more than any words ever could. The Stoics don't teach silence as submission. They teach silence when truth needs time to speak on its own. And when you hold your inner peace, you don't get swept into the emotional storm others create. If you're misunderstood right now, being talked about behind your back, caught in whispers and half-truths, ask yourself, do I really need to explain, or do I just want to feel heard? Are the people believing the rumor even worth my energy? And if I stay silent, but live kindly, work hard, and carry myself with dignity, will time speak for me? I believe the answer will come, if you're quiet long enough to notice. Because in the end, the things that are truly solid don't have to shout. They stand the test of time on their own. You've just walked with me through 12 powerful situations, moments where silence isn't weakness, but a deliberate act of wisdom. We spoke about being criticized, angered, insulted, grieving, misunderstood. And in each of these, choosing silence at the right time became a way to protect your inner freedom. Stoicism never taught us to suffer in silence. It teaches us that in a world constantly buzzing with noise, those who know when to be silent are the ones who truly know what's worth speaking about. Because not every reaction is wise. Not every truth needs to be spoken right away. And not every silence is surrender. Many times, it's the clearest sign of strength and clarity. If you've seen yourself in any of the situations we've shared, I invite you to pause for a moment. Before you defend, breathe. Before you explain, ask yourself, does this truly need to be said? And if the answer is no, then let silence do its work. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest answer. If you've watched this far, leave a comment, I'm learning when to be silent. Because I believe that those who learn the art of silence are also learning the art of self-mastery. I'll see you again in the next lesson, where we continue growing together, not through noise, but through presence and awareness.